They say it takes a village to raise a child, because children need a lot of different people to look out for them. Families can use all the help they can get. After all, no parent is perfect. That's why McCoy leads the Early Intervention and Prevention Initiative. We want to showcase all of the excellent programs in our city that help families learn and grow together. Because when we learn and grow together, we make our village a better place to live. Thank you for tuning in. We hope you enjoy this episode of Our Kids, Our Families, Our Communities.
Hello, my name is Shana Martin, Director of the Early Intervention and Prevention Initiative at McCoy. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Our Kids, Our Families, Our Communities. Today's topic is talking about the challenges in our community that African American young people are facing and some supports and resources that are out there, and also talking a little bit about those challenges and how we can work together to overcome those. So thank you guys for being here today. I have three wonderful guests: Mark Russell from Indianapolis Urban League, Cassandra from 100 Black Men of Indianapolis, and Michael Twyman from Indiana Black Expo, heading up the Your Life Matters effort. So I'll let you guys just take some time to introduce yourselves and talk a little bit about your organization and your role there, and then we'll dive into the topic. So Mark, you want to get us started?
Thank you. Yes, my name is Mark Russell. I'm Director of Education and Family Services at the Indianapolis Urban League. Our programs for youth are primarily school-based, and we're at several locations, including George Washington, T.C. Howe, Ben Davis, and the Renaissance School in Warren Township, among others. For younger youth, we have programs at Creston Intermediate Academy and Middle School, as well as Medina Middle School.
Okay, thank you very much for being here. Appreciate it.
My name is Cassandra Anderson, and I'm the Director of Programs for 100 Black Men of Indianapolis. We are a youth serving agency. Our motto is what they see, they will be, and we serve youth annually through education programs, mentoring programs, and leadership programs. We serve youth K through 8.
Okay, great. Thank you for being here. Appreciate it.
And I'm Michael Twyman, Executive Director of Your Life Matters here in Indianapolis, an initiative of Indiana Black Expo, a collective impact model that's focused on increasing opportunities and expanding the life outcomes for African American young men ages 14 to 24. We work with a number of partners and community stakeholders, including my colleagues here to the right, in being able to provide support and services to this population through a broad-based community effort, knowing that no one organization can do it all, but if we work together, we can work smarter and we can have more impact.
Okay, great. Again, thank you guys for being here. Such an important topic as we're going into February and Black History Month. What are some of the challenges that our young people in our community, African American young people, are facing right now? You want to talk a little bit about that, the statistics, the facts, the things that we're seeing in the newspaper, kind of what's going on and why?
Well, I think your own Mindy Goodpaster had an article in the Recorder back in December talking about mental health issues among particularly young Black folks. And this is something that, because of cultural mores and traditions, we don't like to speak of, but it is a pervasive issue among our young people. Suicide is the second leading cause of death for young Black men, something that we don't like to talk about. And it can even be manifested in things such as suicide by cop. When folks engage in behaviors particularly aggressive and the police have to intervene and have no choice but to use deadly force. And I don't think enough community resources are being used to address this issue.
Okay.
I would also say just some of the issues that some of our youth face are just a lack of hopelessness, a lack of education or quality education. You have 13% of Indianapolis youth dropping out of high school, so that says a lot in of itself. You have 8% or 11% of youth have a parent that's incarcerated, so single parent homes is another issue that our youth face as well.
And I would add that in many ways, all young people are at risk. It's tough growing up in the world today, even as adults, living and being able to survive. We know almost in every area of quality of life in terms of indicators from health to education to employment, young African Americans fare less than their counterparts in every standard. The causes and reasons for that are, of course, multiple. We are still a nation and a community that is dealing with a lot of institutional and structural racism that is systemic and embedded in the way that our country operates and runs. There are also some community issues at play relative to limited opportunities and opportunities that are not provided in a more equitable manner in terms of just being able to allow certain individuals, particularly those who are living in poverty, who have limited educational opportunities, and couple that with just very tough circumstances in which they live in both their families and or neighborhoods, exposed to violence and trauma at young ages. Mr. Russell mentioned the importance of mental health care, and that's something, particularly in the African American community, often being very taboo, just saying I need help, or often not being identified or assessed for mental health services. And so, again, a lot of work to be done, and at the same rate, there are a lot of young African American children that are doing exceptionally well. We don't hear about it often enough, but there are, and I would say that that's arguably the majority.
So a lot you guys have said in a couple of minutes. The mental health issues, and you brought up trauma. A lot of things that happen when we're growing up, and we've talked about this on this show repeatedly because it's all about prevention. But the trauma that happens in families and in households really impacts young people. It leads to suicide. It leads to dropping out. It leads to incarceration. There are a lot of those things. The high school dropout crisis. Why are our young people not succeeding and doing better in school? And institutional racism. As an African American person, I think I always go back to that there are so many things that we do that we have to work within the system, but that system is designed to create barriers and challenges for a large part of our population, for people of color. And so how do we overcome that? What do we do as individuals? What do we do as organizations? What do we do as African American people? Where do we start? Where do we start? And I know there's no answers, but just kind of a conversation, because I think that's, as folks who are watching this show may not understand and recognize that everything that we do every day, it's designed. It's designed to have, somebody said that once, the system is designed to have the outcomes that we're having. Right. And we are living in that every day. Are we perpetuating that? Are we feeding into that? What are we doing to help kind of change that? And what does that look like?
Well, I think part of the things that we need to do is actively mentor young people. It's not an easy thing. I did it myself. In fact, when Michael and I were working together, the executive at where we were at said, well, look, all the black men in this facility are going to go to a school, and you're going to mentor a child, going out there, have lunch with them one day a week. Mine was particularly successful. Quentin, who I consider my son, was struggling very much in the 8th grade. He ended up graduating from high school, going to college on scholarship, and coming back to actually work for me as a youth worker at the Urban League. Okay. So from 8th grade to beyond graduation, we still keep in touch, but not enough people are doing that. If each one would reach one, it would make a significant difference. And yes, institutional racism is a barrier, but there are sufficient resources within our community for us to address it. But we have not chosen to deploy those resources, even with last year's horrendous homicide rate. Not enough folks have stepped up to the plate to say this is unacceptable and I'm responsible for these young people, whether you are a biological parent or not.
I agree with him 100%. At the 100, again, our motto is what they see, they'll be. And so we have real men giving real time back to our youth, and they're able to see, okay, there is an option outside of doing something on the street or selling drugs or, acting up in school. We go into IPS schools. We're in 6 IPS schools where men mentor over their lunch hour a group of students as well. And then we also have other programs that provide them access to positive role models. So I think as a community, we need to understand that it's bigger than us and take responsibility for our community as a whole. Back in the day, the saying was it takes a whole village to raise a child. And I really think that we need to get back to that mentality in order for our children to be successful and overcome some of the issues that they're facing. And then just getting awareness of the organizations that are out there, providing resources to parents to let them know, hey, there are organizations that are there to stand in the gap with you as you walk alongside your child.
The whole idea of standing in the gap, I couldn't agree with more. And you talk about, are there any answers? I think there are some answers. We really know what works well. I think, unfortunately, we are a society that wants things to happen instantly. And oftentimes those who are investing resources in the things that work only will do it for a period of time. And if we're going to get better at this, it's doing the right things over an extended period of time and on a constant, consistent basis. The importance of adult relationships and just responsible, caring adults in the life of any child is so important. It is what many of us perhaps had in the larger community that you speak of. It doesn't always have to be your parent. Oftentimes it's an honest uncle, it's a teacher, it's a mentor, it's a friend, a cousin, but it starts with us seeing a need and a responsibility beyond just ourselves, our homes, and our families.
So it takes a village. What experience have you had? You've talked a lot about working with individual children, but how does the family system respond to you working with that? Because ultimately you're mentoring, you're spending time with the child, but then they're going back home, they're going back to their community, they're going back to their village. So what efforts are being done to help kind of strengthen, that village along with the work that you're doing with the child?
For our organization, we invite the parents to actively participate, and I think that that's key. We have a financial literacy program. For 16 weeks, they learn about the basics of investing. Parents are invited to sit in on those sessions, and a lot of them attend because it allows them to manage their money better. So what the children are learning, they're also taking it back home, and they're sharing it with their parents, and their parents become excited because they can see the difference in their child. So we invite the parents to actively become a part of what we're doing, because we know that it can't be successful unless we have parent buy-in.
And finding ways to, I think, support parents in their role. And I love the idea that 100, I know a number of organizations, in order to serve youth, we have to serve them in the context of their family environment, their neighborhood, and their community environment. And so we want to come alongside whatever is working and working well, not to take away from or be in place of. And so the whole idea, I think, of really doing it and seeing young people in a larger context is important.
Listen, just in terms of resources, I don't think we as a city and county have really put our dollars where our rhetoric is. In terms of investment in the community at the community level. So we can spend a great deal of time with youth, you can mentor youth, but as you pointed out, they do have to go back to their home environments. When those environments are marked by disinvestment and lack of resources, a lot of the work that we do has the risk of falling to the wayside. So we have to have a frank conversation about allocation of resources. And it's not a matter of, oh, here they go again, give us some money. This is our money too. We pay taxes, and just like I don't have a lot of choice about keeping the Colts and the Pacers in town and subsidies that those professional sports teams receive, sometimes we have to make investments that not everyone will agree with, but that can be proven to benefit the community as a whole. We have to do a better job of that for our young people.
It has to be a holistic approach. A lot of times we do forget about the family and we focus on the child, and so we don't provide those resources to equip the family, neglecting the fact, or we don't understand or realize that the parent has issues that they haven't dealt with themselves.
Right.
So we have to be able to allow them to have access to the mental health resources, economic empower them further in their education as well. So we do have to approach it from a holistic point.
And I would just add too, in terms of the allocation of resources, I think Indianapolis is kind of the embarrassment of riches. We have so many resources here in this community, philanthropic, corporate, a very sophisticated nonprofit sector, wonderful volunteers, individuals who are willing to roll up their sleeves. This is a community that often comes together when it wants to around certain things. And the public-private partnerships have always been stellar in this community. So it's a matter, I think, of creating a public will. And when we say that certain things are not acceptable, and we are serious about trying to really provide solutions, we'll do that. And I think, in terms of what is even sustainable from an economic development standpoint, you cannot have a significant segment of your population living in poverty and being unemployed and be a world-class city.
Correct.
You just can't. You can't reconcile those two.
Yeah.
So we have to find ways, as Mark has said, to be able to be smart in terms of how we allocate the resources. And I think that takes a great deal of advocacy on a lot of our parts to be able to make the point and to continue to put it on the minds of people, particularly who are in power and of influence and able to make decisions about the things that are most important in our community.
And that's again, it goes back to we can do what we can at the neighborhood level. And I think one of the things in terms of family, they need to be able to access resources, and we need to do a better job of compiling what programs are out there. We had a meeting of the African American Coalition at the Urban League back in August of 2015, where a lot of groups were represented, and frankly, we didn't know what each other were doing. So we need to, McCoy has a youth directory, we need to have resources for parents out there. Another hidden issue that's not discussed enough, which the Urban League is going to be addressing urgently in 2016, is literacy. There are a lot of parents that struggle with basic literacy. And so it's very hard to parent when you're absent of that very basic skill. And then I know our time is short, but I just wanted to mention a phenomenon that I don't think a lot of people are aware of, and it was shared with me by one of our former youth workers, Joe Johnson, and it's called HALT, H-A-L-T, and that is children who are hungry, angry, lonely, and tired. And that manifests itself in a variety of ways. But hunger is very basic. Anger has many applications. Being lonely, going back to mental health, being tired, because many of our children are forced at an early age to become breadwinners in the household. It's not uncommon for our high school students in our program to work till 12 or 2 o'clock in the morning and then be back at school. And again, we have to demand that our civic and political leadership not sit on the sideline while these youth's lives are deteriorating in our city as well.
And some of those same youth, in addition to working to try to take care of their households, because of a number of different reasons, have to, oftentimes resort to looking at illegal means by which to support their family. So a lot of young people getting involved in acts of crime just to put food on the table.
Yeah. It's desperate. They're desperate.
They're desperate.
Yeah. And
Yes.
when you're 12
Basic
and
needs are not
13,
being
you
met.
don't have what other options
Right.
are out there, particularly
Yes.
in a city where youth employment does not seem to be a priority or
Right.
has been a challenge.
35% of youth are unemployed here, 35%. When it's easier to get a gun than a job, then you can see the results of it.
Right.
And they want to work. We have
Yeah, they do.
in one of our programs, one of the number one things that they asked our mentors were, how do we get jobs? And these are 7th and 8th graders, and their main concern at 7th and 8th grade was they wanted to know, how can I start working?
Okay. And what answers do they get?
Right.
Curiosity. Yeah, I mean.
Well, frankly, there aren't a lot of avenues out
Exactly,
there. And if we can spend $20,000 a year to incarcerate. But we won't invest that much or even a third of that for summer youth employment programs, for employment initiatives for children. And it's one thing to graduate from high school, but they have to have jobs to go to. And right now, even with our higher graduation rates, employers are saying that children, all races, lack the requisite skills to be career ready.
Right.
So we have a lot of deficits that need to be addressed. And like many areas of life in this country, when when white folks have a cold, black folks get pneumonia, because we're disproportionately affected by these trends that affect everyone.
Yes, so much. My wheels are turning here. And I think one of the things you've talked a lot about is that these are not short-term. There are no short-term solutions.
No.
These are long-term. They're long-term problems. These are things we've been working on for years and years and years, and here we are with it. So in 6 months, a year, 2 years worth of funding, we're not going to undo or overcome all of these challenges. So it's really having folks that are going to step in and step up, contribute, and be involved and engaged for years and years and years and years. And as somebody who's worked in nonprofit work, how do you get the community to really understand that and recognize that? And Your Life Matters, I think, is a big part of that. I mean, that as a collective impact, I mean, that's one of the things that you're building, the partnerships and the collaborations.
For certain, and it comes with a little bit of frustration because the impatience that people have that there should be this quick fix. Well, Your Life Matters has been around for a few months. Why are we not seeing a decrease in the crime on the streets? Well, I think it's going to take a little while. I mean, if you look at issues that we've all talked about in terms of how we embrace young people and support them and give them as many opportunities to be successful, it's when we don't do that is when we see what we see in terms of adult behavior, in terms of even juvenile crime. If you're having bad experiences in school and you look at the racial disparities work nationally and then locally, in terms of school suspensions and expulsions, particularly of African American males, it's just ridiculous. And if you get turned off at school at age 10 and thrown out of school, you can almost basically see your future being one that is not going to lead to much of a productive life, if not organizations like the ones here and a number of others trying to again stand in the gap. But the sheer numbers of individuals that find themselves being dismissed or just isolated. Disconnected is the term that they often use to disconnected youth. These are disconnected to resources, disconnected to caring adults, disconnected to systems and supports that will allow them to be successful. Then we wonder why crime is up. We wonder why so many young people are finding themselves on the wrong side of the law. But it's, I think, oftentimes because we have not stepped up to try to prevent those things from happening and supporting young people where they are.
And I think a part of that prevention, even if you look at the school, the makeup of the school, students have to see people who look like them. So we need to do a better job of diversifying our teacher pool. We need to do a better job of training our teachers how to deal with minority students. Because if you don't understand the dynamics, you don't understand that that child came to school without a meal, or that child may have witnessed their mom or father being domestic violence taking place before they get to school, the issues that they deal with, then you will not understand when that child begins to act out in class. And you'll just dismiss them and say that they're disruptive or have a behavior issue, but there's a root cause of that behavior issue. Right. So it has to come from a holistic approach where we have to be able to put people in place that look like them and have the training and the understanding to, and the compassion for them to see them succeed.
And both of the guests here pointed out a very important issue, which is education. We cannot, and going back to resources, the philanthropic community can do a lot in terms of being an advocate and educating the legislature. for whatever reason, it has not become a priority to address some of these issues. But one very basic issue that's failing in education, unlike many areas, I'm from Fort Wayne originally, there is a alternative school for the Fort Wayne community school system. Many of the 11 school districts here, once a child is kicked out of public school, they don't have anywhere to go. And to me, it should be mandated that if a child is expelled, or pushed out of school, that they have an alternative educational arrangement. And for whatever reason, we have not made that a priority and said we are not going to leave these kids to their own devices and to be out on the street when they're expelled. Fine, if they're expelled, put them in an alternative learning environment.
IPS has an alternative school. It's called Longfellow Academy. And actually the 100 went in and we were partnering with them to provide mentoring services. And I will tell you that those students are often forgotten about. Those are the students who we feel are too difficult to go in and work with. And so we forget about that we need to invest in those students as well. I've walked those halls, I've interacted with those students, and I've seen the level of desperation and despair and hopelessness that they come to school with every day. And so we need to be able to go in and provide and shine that light and say, there is hope. You can still graduate from high school. There are things, you can be successful. So we do have one. It's just we're not aware of it, and some of us are not willing to go in and invest the time to work with those students.
And we're at the Renaissance, which is Warren Township's alternative school as well. But there again, I still advocate there are not enough.
No. And there needs to be also more incentives for organizations, individuals to be able to have the resources to work with the most difficult populations. Most times, again, going back to us wanting quick fixes, folks like to invest in cream of the crop, the ones that we can move real quickly and see a result. Well, that just further pushes us down because we continue to ignore those that are on the bottom of the heap. And
those on the edge.
And those on the edge, which is a real significant number, the ones that are really just on that tight margin.
Yeah, I agree. And I would, talking about the expulsion issue, go back even further. Why are these children being expelled from school? Why are they being suspended? And disproportionately, we know it's African American students. And yesterday I was in a meeting where we were talking about parent engagement and how that's even defined. And one of my comments, as I was the only African American in the room, is because that's the experience. If I'm sitting in a room with people who don't look like me, who are making decisions, why would I be engaged? Why would I feel like I have a say or a voice when all of you look the same, feel the same, or talking the same as providers, but here I am as a family member or as a mom wanting the best for my child, but why would I feel like I should be engaged? Am I really being invited to be engaged?
And how do you define engagement? Because for different ethnicities and backgrounds, maybe attending a parent-teacher meeting is engagement.
True.
And somehow not attending is defined as lack of engagement or not caring, and that's not true. There may be language barriers. Parents are probably working. So we need to get away from being trying to have a catch-all definition of caring or engagement.
I agree.
And we have to be frank about the expulsion issue as well. When schools are beginning, in the first part of the year, they have a drive to have 95, 98% attendance rate because they know that their tuition, their reimbursement from the state is based on attendance. What happens after the ADM, after the average count for the year? Expulsions go through the roof.
Exactly.
So if the schools don't care after that, then, in terms of resources, maybe the General Assembly should come up with a way to give that schools money for those expelled kids to organizations like ours so we can work with them.
Right.
Well, we're technically out of time. So, but just real quickly, I would like for each of you to kind of tell us how do families get to you? How, if families are watching the show, parents are saying, I didn't know the Urban League did all this. I didn't know 100 Black Men had all of these, activities and stuff. I want to volunteer. I want my kids to get involved. How do they get to Indianapolis Urban League?
Call us at the front desk, 693-7603. Again, my name is Mark. I'm the only Mark there. That's all you need.
Okay.
We deal with education and family services. We have employment programs. We help offenders re-entering. We deal with folks that have HIV, AIDS, and other sexually transmitted infections. So we help a lot of people in many different ways.
Youth and adults?
Yes.
Correct. Okay. Cassandra?
For us, you can contact 921-1276. That is our main number. You can also visit our website at www.100blackmenindy.org. And I am the Director of Programs, so you can select option 3, and that will ring directly to me when you call the office, and I can get you plugged in.
Okay. And lots of programs?
Yes.
For Summer Academy, where
Yes.
my
Summer
daughter's
Academy
gone
is coming
to.
up. We have a Summer Academy K through 8. It's a
Great.
6-week academy, and it's phenomenal.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And for Your Life Matters, you can contact Indiana Black Expo's main number, which is 925-2702. If you particularly have a young African American man that you are looking to provide some additional support to, we're not a direct service provider, but we're going to link them up
Make all the
to
connections.
our colleagues and organizations that are serving them. And then, of course, Indiana Black Expo has youth and family programs with a number of things that they do year-round. Indiana Black Expo is just not Summer Celebration and Circle City Classic, but year-round programming, and that same number, 925-2702.
Okay. Thank you guys very much. Really appreciate it. Great show. A lot of wonderful information shared. I'm sure we could probably go on and on and on. A huge topic, lots of implications, just lots of things. So really appreciate you being here and appreciate you taking the time to tune in to another episode of Our Kids, Our Families, Our Communities. And hopefully you'll take the time to volunteer and get involved. Thank you very much and look forward to seeing you again next time.